Hello, good evening and welcome. I'm Karima Brown and you're watching Political Exchange, where we unpack Africa's political economy. South Africa's Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga's handling of the education challenges in Africa's largest economy has come under close scrutiny from both opposition political parties as well as civil society organizations. She is often literally in the eye of the storm. She joined us as our special guest tonight on Political Exchange. Minister, thank you for your time and welcome. Now, of course, we've seen recently that the court has stipulated that you have to provide norms and standards by which we are able to then measure implementation, particularly as it relates to infrastructure in schools. When I looked at your budget vote speech in 2011, you told the National Assembly it's going to take 20 years, considering the legacy of apartheid, for us to catch up with the backlog. Minister, why did Equal Education have to go to court to get you to say it's a difficult thing to do and we need to have an agreement on, when we can do it so that we can all keep each other accountable?
It's very unfortunate the way the matter has been distorted. I can tell you, Karim, the question of norms and standards even was done by my predecessor. Minister Pando, when I was still MEC, regulated norms and standards, which we have been using ever since the sector. And those were just a framework guiding provinces. And when equal education came with a storm, I could have resisted because the Act says I can. It's my discretion to do it. But I already felt that I don't need a battle with them. So that I've been ordered by the court it's a distortion of facts, and that's what I've even said to them. And when we met with them, said to them, we've never, as a state, refused to have norms and standards. We are the ones which led with norms and standards. But to have them as regulations, it doesn't even hurt us also. We can have them as regulations. I don't want to go to court with you and fight with you. The last week's case, the case that happened, it was an agreement, and I was quite surprised when they said they have won a settlement against me. It's an agreement. Okay, I said to them,
Let's leave it around the language, whether you've won or they've won, or whether it's an agreement. The reality, Minister, is that everybody is trying to make sure that that which the government promises is in fact delivered. When we look at the question of infrastructure, particularly as it relates to mud schools, sometimes what is promised is not delivered. And sometimes the reason for that is not necessarily with you. It is elsewhere down the pipeline. Take us through why at some point you make announcements that by such and such a date we will have such and such a target. And then when the date comes and goes, it's not happening, and then you say, well, it's not my fault, it's someone else's fault down the line.
And that's what is important about this issue about norms and standards, which I've said to Equal Education. Norms and standards won't give us infrastructure. It's the implementation, even whether it's called framework or regulations, that is going to give us infrastructure. So the fact that, as I say, we went to court, then there was a regulation or a decision around the court that we should have, it's neither here nor there, because there are lots of policies which are not either implemented or not implementable. What will take us, even as a state, in terms of the legacy that we have inherited? When we came into office, more than 15,000 schools didn't have water and electricity. 20 years down the line, only 1,500 and something schools don't have water and electricity.
Minister, repeat those statistics because they are important, because I think there's often a lack of understanding of what we came from 20 years ago. There's the assumption that 20 years ago we were all at the same starting line. We weren't. How many schools did have electricity and water in 1994, and how many have today?
Almost 15,000 didn't have water and electricity. Now only 1,800 doesn't have electricity. More than 10,000 of our schools didn't have sanitation. You are saying it's about 500 schools which don't have sanitation. So the fact that 20 years down the line we've not implemented, it's not very true. It could be that we've really not been going out to the streets to say, here's another school electrified, here's another school electrified. We've committed ourselves as government to say, we will try that by 2014, basic facilities will be there, and we'll be doing quite well, and provinces have been doing quite well.
Let's park at basic services. If you take it province by province, in terms of, let's say, sanitation, water, lights, schools with roofs over their heads, that solid structures, what have we got?
For instance, Gauteng, when I was this, it's not as if all schools were at a normal functional level. I can tell you in Gauteng, there are not more than 10 schools without water and electricity. What has been, I think, a very unfortunate situation nationally, almost all provinces had mud structures. For instance, in Gauteng, we had what we call dangerous structures like your asbestos, your zinc schools. All provinces except for Eastern Cape have been able to eradicate their mud structures. KZN, which also had a number of mud structures, they had demolished their last mud structure just 6 months back. So what really has been putting us in bad light is the fact that Eastern Cape as a province had not kept up with what had been planned by government, but all other
or what
provinces...
has in fact been delivered at a national level.
Yeah, all other provinces have done what President Thabo had asked them to do in 2006.
But now, if you look at the reasons why the Eastern Cape hasn't come to the party, what exactly is the reasons, Minister? Because when you look at the Eastern Cape, the ANC Secretary General Karima likes saying that the Eastern Cape is like the Cinderella Province. It comes number last for everything. Why is it that the Eastern Cape is doing poorly? Is it weak government? Is it bad management of resources? Is it companies that are not building on time and on budget? What is the problem?
Yeah, it would be really unfair to say that Cinderella as if they've been really discriminated against, because all other provinces have pulled their weight, they've done all they could. The major problem in the Eastern Cape has been, yes, indeed, there was a bigger backlog, because, for instance, they had two homelands, the Eastern Cape and the Ciskei. And that in itself just meant that there were two areas in the province which had been underdeveloped as compared to other provinces. So we can admit that they had a bigger backlog, but also there's been serious problems of governance.
Right.
And that, I mean, that would be the bottom line, that unlike other provinces which had equal backlog, they had a bigger backlog, but they also have been serious problems of governance, which made them to lag behind.
Now, you've tried to intervene in the Eastern Cape. You have brought the Constitution to bear. You've instituted certain sections to try and impose a tighter rein in terms of control. When you sit back, Minister, and you look and you evaluate at your measures to try and get the provincial department there to, pull its weight, were those measures rather successful? Does it help you that education has concurrent functions at national and provincial level, for example?
That for me has its own advantages and disadvantages. If you look at provinces which are well run, like Gauteng, Western Cape, Free State, KZN, those concurrent functions have been very helpful in a sense that they create new energy with people who've got authority to do things without having to run to the center. Exactly. And you really look at the energy in those provinces to get things to happen. I think the concurrent functions, that's where you see the strengths, because as a nation, you learn from each other. You don't have to all wait for one. I mean, Western Cape will come with a strong model around how to use ICTs. The other province, KZN, for instance, is quite strong in terms of how you re-engineer the old, and we learn from each other. So the concurrent functions is very helpful in that sense, that you do have 9 people who are really sleeping and eating education and driving the process. It becomes a problem where there's a weak link, and all of you, and which is what I think is happening, that because there are difficulties in Limpopo and Eastern Cape, we undermine the good work that other provinces are doing. I mean, you look at Western Cape, you look at Gauteng, KZ, and all, even Mpumalanga, the efforts that they've put to get things right, then it's really undermined by the fact that there are these two provinces which are not doing quite well. But for me, I was asked to think back, I think those concurrent functions are fine. It's just that perhaps we have to streamline them further to say if there are problems, what do we do? Because even intervention, going to the Eastern Cape with an administrator who's alone, when there's a whole bureaucracy that still belongs to the province, doesn't help you that much. It does help you to put a valve and sort out things. In the Eastern Cape, the problems are deep, they're historic, they're systemic, and you need a much more stronger intervention to make things happen. Minister, so the concurrency there is not very helpful, but on the whole, I really think the concurrent powers are very helpful in terms of getting enough energy to turn this ship around. What
I'm getting from you, and tell me if I'm wrong, you're saying that you need a much more of a multidisciplinary approach in places like the Eastern Cape. You can't send a lone person in there against a failing bureaucracy. Now, if one takes, for example, the fact that South Africa has decided infrastructure is the big program through which we're going to kickstart, economic growth. How have you been able, given your own struggles to get money from Treasury to commit to infrastructure, how have you taken advantage of that economic program that ought to be speaking to you? I mean, if I listen to the Minister for Higher Education, for example, he's been able to secure money for 2 new universities, one in the Northern Cape, one in Limpopo. Have you gone and gotten your chunk and particularly put it in provinces like Limpopo, like Eastern Cape, where it's required?
Exactly. And that's what is also unfortunate about concurrency, because we can also show and demonstrate that if we have one successful center of operation, things happen. What would have happened when national department realized that we're not making progress in the Eastern Cape, they earmarked money, which we call the ASIDI, to be used specifically for Eastern Cape and also for mud and dangerous structures. And because we had our own monies national, we're able to set up processes that have enabled us to make the necessary dent. The schools that were opening, for instance, from next week will be handing over at the rate of one school a week to different communities.
Which provinces, Minister?
It's in Eastern Cape. And simply because we had national resources, we didn't have to rely on the province to do things, to make things happen. But that is limited to mud structures, to basic sanitation. If, for instance, as a minister, there's a school without a roof in the Eastern Cape, there's nothing I can do about it because the budget goes through the province. All I can do is to say, MEC, please do something about it. And that's as far as I can go. I don't appoint MECs. They don't account to me. So all I can do is to really say that he should do it, but if he doesn't do it, there's nothing I can do about it.
Now, Minister, when you speak like this, you can be misinterpreted. One can infer from that you're washing your hands of the problem. It's not my problem, I can't do anything about it. But the law doesn't allow you to do it. Because like you say, you don't appoint MECs and they don't account to you. But what you do, Minister, is that you have your MINMEC meetings. You have your meetings with your MECs to operationalize national plans, national visions. What do you do in those meetings? Where's your stick to beat the non-performers?
No, the stick is it's already that's why sometimes we call them MECs. It's an education coordinating committee. What, for instance, we'll do with maths and science, I just did a review on why we're not making the necessary breakthrough in maths and science, as instructed by the president. So I had a very high-level team to go into provinces. And the team comes back and say, Minister, your powers around policy, monitoring, and support. Your predecessors by 2001 had a maths and science strategy. If you were to ask us as professors to make your strategy, we'll give you the same strategy. It's still relevant 10 years down the line.
So why
has it not? Provinces have to implement it. I mean, of the education budget, I don't have more than 10% of that budget. That budget goes to provinces. And I say it's a very useful tool, but
in the wrong hands, it's destructive.
Exactly, because the laws, as I say, the concurrent powers say, as a Minister of Education, I make policies, monitor them. So I can monitor to the colleague to say, there are schools which were storm damaged 2 years back. We have not done anything about it. That's as far as I can go legally. The budgets are with the provinces. By the time they go to provinces, the management of those resources lies with the provinces, with their treasuries, with a clear sphere of government. And that's why when we have to intervene in a province, it's a whole rigmarole. You have to go through Parliament, make a request that we want to go to Section 1B, NCOP has to approve or not approve to say, so because you can't, the Constitution says you can't intervene or interfere in another sphere of government. So if I'm going to say, if the MEC has a roof which was damaged, storm damage, I can't take his money. It's up to that MEC has full authority and powers and executive authority to instruct where the money goes. As a national minister, I make policies, monitor, and evaluate and support, but not implement. So the implementation still lies in provinces. We can only intervene when we have such a special funds, like ASID is a special fund, that's only when I can work in provinces, and specifically for that project, but nothing more.